Welcome to the BookTube channel, Jack in the Book Stack, where I talk about a wide variety of book genres and the bookish lifestyle. I want to rank all the books that I read in the month of June in order from my least favorite to my most favorite. I have 3 categories, and those are books that I disliked, liked, and loved. But before I kick things off, I want to talk about books that are outside of these rankings. These are my unranked books. First and foremost, I read part of Queen of Shadows, but I'm not ranking it because it is in progress. Next up, I have Madship by Robin Hobb. This is unranked because I DNF'd it at page 335. I was doing a reading vlog for this trilogy of books. This is book 2, and I'm not DNFing it forever. I just found it to be causing a lot of tension and anxiety in myself in a time that I needed more of an escape. So because it was so emotional, I had to temporarily put it down. I am very interested in continuing in the story. I really want to see what happens with these characters in this plot, so I will continue in the trilogy, just not right now, so this is unranked. Next up, from Kindle Unlimited, I DNF'd The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, which is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Now, book 1, I loved up until the ending, and that's because this female main character really took a downward spiral for me. And book 2, I gave it about 100 pages and she did not get any better in my opinion. I felt like she was just very self-centered and couldn't look at the bigger picture to think strategically, very emotionally driven, based on just how things impacted her directly. Next up from Kindle Unlimited, I DNF'd Radical Candor. And this one I DNF'd after reading the introduction because even though it seems like it's about exactly what the title says, how to be a kick-ass boss, I was looking for more strategy and insight on how to be a better communicator, not just with direct reports or employees, but across all different type of working relationships. So like stakeholders and peers and bosses and management and like upward communication. I wanted more variety, and it seemed like this book was focused specifically on one type of working relationship. So not what I was looking for at this time. Next up, I checked out the ebook from Libby for Giovanni's Room. I picked this up because I really have been wanting to try some James Baldwin. I really wanted to see what his writing style was like, and I disliked this book specifically for the writing style. I didn't jive with it. It's not for me, but I'm glad I figured that out. It was really in this dialogue style that I found to be very disruptive, and I could not get into the flow of it. It was just very choppy and strange to me. Also, there were just some really dislikable characters, and it kind of reminded me of Normal People by Sally Rooney. So hey, if you like Sally Rooney, you may like Giovanni's Room and James Baldwin's writing style, because that was more of kind of what it was like, or what it reminded me of. And this one also had very, very, very heavy foreshadowing, where I couldn't even tell at what point in the timeline we were in the book. It was just very heavy foreshadowing for me that I normally really like foreshadowing, but this one I just found kind of disorienting, and that's why it's my least favorite book of the month. Are you even a bookworm if you're not reading 7 Days in June in June? I don't think so. I picked up this long-awaited read. It is a contemporary romance. It is a second chance romance. I picked it up because I heard that there were more mature characters over the age of 30, so it was a more mature love story, and there was chronic pain or chronic illness representation. So those are the 2 reasons why I wanted to pick this up outside of the epic theme, but I did not enjoy it. Just because our characters are over the age of 30, it does not mean that they are mature. And our main character, I thought, was so self-centered that I think he deserved way better. I don't think she deserved him, because she just like made him grovel for all these things and apologize for these things that totally weren't even his fault. She can be upset about something, but when he provided rationale for why something happened, she should have forgiven him right then, not like held it against him. And so I just really, really didn't like her. In addition to the fact that this plot is about 2 authors as adults, they're both 32, and they are writing about each other in their books because they spent a handful of days together when they were in high school, and fell in love and never forgot each other. And that's just unrealistic to me. Do you remember your high school boyfriend or girlfriend or your high school crush? And can you imagine in your 30s still being hung up on them? I don't think so. That is it for the disliked category. So let's move to the liked category. I listened to the audiobook for Butts, A Backstory, and I picked this one up because I saw it on the booktube channel Books with Emily Fox, who I just adore her, and she often reads some really quirky and different nonfiction books. So this one seemed like it would be an informative and yet cheeky and lighthearted read. So I listened to this, and it is the history of like society's opinions on butts and how we view them. And there were the things that I expected, like Sir Mix-a-Lot, talked about J-Lo, talked about the Kardashians, but it really took a heavier tone because most of the book focused on race, specifically race, and how that influences the perception of butts. And so it takes a much heavier, more serious tone than I was really expecting. So I liked this book, but it's the lowest of the liked category because it didn't hit the way that I wanted it to, did not meet my expectations, but there were some insightful views on society's opinion on butts, I guess. The next book that I liked in June was Book Eaters. And this is a fantasy with a dash of horror that has a super unique, cool world and like magic system. And that is that there are these people that are book eaters. They eat books. They look like humans, but they're not humans. They eat books and they kind of like ingest the story. So like kids eat fantasy books as they're growing up, and that's what they focus on. But then as an adult, like you can eat a map and then you know geography in the area. So they absorb those, and then different books have different flavors. Super unique and cool. There was a cool element of how they're not necessarily going extinct, but there aren't as many females that can have book eater babies. And so it almost took on like a Handmaid's Tale kind of vibe with like a breeding element to it, how the women are like shuffled around to breed more book eaters. So that was interesting, but the overall storyline of this mother who's trying to save her child, so like that has a cool element, and that's probably where the horror comes in, even though it wasn't heavy on the horror. But the whole mother trying to save her son thing, I wasn't necessarily engaged in as much as I was like the overall world. So that's why I liked Book Eaters, but it didn't quite cross the line into love for me. But you don't typically love every book that you read, and June was actually wildly successful for me. I think this was probably my best reading month because there were so many books that fit into this loved category. The first of them, so the one that I loved the least, was Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. This is a dark romance. I think this has to be one of my favorite dark romance books, particularly because a lot hinges, like for my opinion, on the female main character. And the one in this was awesome. She was not a pushover. She wasn't whining. She wasn't like a victim in any way. She could hold her own with the boys. She was incredibly intelligent, kind of a smartass. Like, she was not intimidated by the guys in this dark romance at all. So the only thing that was a little bit strange about this one is there are flashbacks 3 years prior. So we're dealing with a female main character who's 19 in the present day and 16 in the flashbacks. Way too young for what I like to see in dark romance. It kind of grosses me out a little bit. But when she's 16, the graduates, the high school graduates that were on the basketball team, come back every year on Devil's Night, the night before Halloween, to like play all these pranks and like haze the new basketball team. And I'm just like, what college kids want to go back to their high school to play pranks? Like, that seems kind of juvenile to me, but you have to suspend your disbelief with any dark romance, and that was the area that I had to here. Next up, I read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which is a Hercule Poirot book by Agatha Christie. This is number 4 in the Poirot series. I have been making my way through these books. I did like a 24-hour Agatha Christie readathon and read some of her mysteries. Didn't solve a single one, but that's okay. So I was continuing with all the books with this one, and it was so good. So many times I find myself thinking, I want to read a character like Hercule Poirot, someone who's arrogant and conceited and yet lovable at the same time. He just knows his stuff, and he's an expert and quirky and lovable despite his arrogance. I'm always thinking I want to read a character just like that. So when I was looking at my bookshelf, I was like, well, why don't I just read that character? There's plenty of books in this series. So that's what I did. I read this one, and it's kind of funny because the title in itself is a spoiler, because when you meet all the characters, Roger Ackroyd, he's alive, right? So you kind of know like something's gonna happen to him. But I enjoyed this one. The twist of it, like the whodunit, I don't think I've ever seen it done before. It was really good. I suspected something was going on with this character, but I didn't expect this to be the answer. And it was just a great twist of a read. I love Hercule Poirot, and I love this book. In the month of June, there were really 3 reads that I could consider my favorite of the month. It was really hard to pick the number 1 spot. I think I've landed on, though, for my 3rd favorite read of the month to be the Veronica Speedwell books that I read. I started this series during a 24-hour reading vlog, seeing how many I could read in one day. And I really fell in love with this series. I love Veronica Speedwell. She's in the running to be my favorite female character of all time. She's a feminist icon. She's fiercely independent. She is smart as hell. And I love the books for each one has a very individual mystery going on. There's an overarching mystery that crosses over all the books, but each one really has its own identity and voice. I think book 4, A Dangerous Collaboration, was my favorite of the series so far because I love the mystery setting of an isolated island where they're in a castle and there's a mystery going on that they need to solve. All the books are highly quotable. I feel like if you like to annotate, these books are incredible for like highlighting different lines and different comments. So much going on in these books, and this one had me squealing and jumping for joy, and I tore through the book. I was so engaged in the story, and this is where this slow burn romance like is coming to a boil. So I cannot wait to keep going in the Veronica Speedwell series. My 2nd favorite read of the month has to go to the new release Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. This has been all over the place. I did a dedicated review video simply talking about this book, so check that one out if you need to see more about the plot, if you want to see my reactions to it, my analysis of it. There's a lot to cover in this book. I have 2 additional comments I wanted to make on this book outside of the video I did. I was watching a video by Murphy, and she read this book. It was a reading vlog, and she called out that the themes are very heavy-handed in this book, just like they were in this author's other book, Babel. And that was a criticism I had in Babel, that it was very heavy-handed on the themes, and it kind of turned me off in that book. Here I didn't mind it as much. And I think because as like it's a satire, I kind of need that more directness to make sure that I'm getting the point of the book, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know if that's it, but the heavy-handedness of the themes did not bother me in Yellowface like it did in Babel. But I'm also just a hypocrite, I guess. Then there's another video that I watched by the Poptometrist. I will link these videos down below so you can check them out. But he had a great point in that this book, I probably enjoyed it as much as I did because I'm actively involved in the bookish community, right? Like, if you're not on BookTube and Bookstagram, would you find this as entertaining if you're just a casual reader going to pick this up off the shelf? I don't know. Maybe I love this so much because I understand what's going on. The secrets of the publishing industry are more interesting to me because I am a participant in that market by buying these books. I don't know, but those were 2 videos I saw that really gave me some additional things to consider. June was probably my best reading month ever in terms of reading books that I loved, but I have to pick a favorite, and so that will go to Mistborn Era 2. I read all 4 books in this installment of the Mistborn series. I just listened to the 4th one on audio because it's not available yet, and I love this. I did a reading vlog that really captures the magic of me experiencing this world. There were 2 elements that made this an all-time favorite series for me. Firstly was the tone. It is a high magic system, and that provides a lot of interest in everything, but this has a much lighter tone. There's sarcasm and humor and wit, and so it was really that tone that was exactly what I needed. It just hit the nail on the head for what I was looking for. And a lot of that humor came because of the second element that I loved, which was the characters. Wayne was so funny. I love Wayne's character. He was so humorous, and yet he had so much depth and substance to him. And the friendships were so sweet, how they took care of each other. Marcy was an awesome female main character who was very independent, kind of a feminist. There was a character in here that I relate to more than any character I've ever read, because they are super organized and writing lists for everything and always thinking of the worst case scenario. So there were so many moving parts in this series that I loved, and I think because it just gave me exactly what I needed, that's why it was my favorite read in June. But thank you so much for hanging out with me in this video. Happy reading. I will see you next time.